are for the Bring a Trailer podcast. I'm Randy Nonnenberg, co-founder of BAT, and I'm here with Howard Swig, our head of auctions. How you doing, Howard?
Very well.
We're excited to be back. We both got invited back, so that's the first good news. We're excited to be here and share some cool topics with you today. We're going to dive right into it. We're going to talk about some interesting submissions that Howard's been seeing. That'll kickstart some conversation. And then an interesting one for both of us, which is seasonality. A lot of people ask, hey, is it a good time to sell? Is it a bad time to sell? There's snow on the ground. Like, should I sell my convertible? We have some really interesting data from BAT over the years of what that looks like, and some stories and some anecdotes about what we've seen in terms of listings and sales in the middle of summer and in the dead of winter. So I think that'll be interesting to talk about. And then third, after that, we'll have a cool interview that Howard's going to be doing. Howard, who are you interviewing today?
Today we've got Jason Van Sickle, who's the curator of vehicles for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. We are doing a cool partnership with them. They are deaccessioning a large grouping of cars and motorcycles, passenger cars, race cars, and motorcycles from the museum collection. So we'll have Jason on to chat about Indy, the museum, the Indy 500, and all sorts of stuff.
Cool. I've been really psyched to watch those on the site, and that's been an interesting partnership to develop on BAT and have them selling, super pre-war type stuff all the way up to they're going to start potentially selling some more modern sports cars. So that museum is full of all sorts of stuff. But submissions, Howard, let's dive in. I mean, every week we could sit here and talk about just the most recent week of curveballs that you and your team have seen. And we've had some funny text threads going with the whole staff or different members of staff seeing cars come through this week. What has stood out to you?
Oh, man. I mean, like, for starters, how many total submissions have we had since the start of BAT auctions in 2014? Like, I don't know, 200,000, 250,000?
Yeah, it's right around 200,000, I think.
So, yeah, I mean, at that level, when something comes along that we've never seen before, that has never been submitted in over 200,000 submissions, we definitely take notice. I mean, that can be everything from a Lamborghini Miura to 83 Mercury Lynx. Like, it's it's all over the map. So the one that caught my attention recently was a Renault Alliance Cup car. Never had seen one of those before. Honestly, I wasn't really even aware of what it was. So Renault Alliance Cup car, big picture. In the 1980s, there were some really wonderful things happening at the lower rungs of the racing world. So I, shot Randy a text like, Alliance Cup car, this is unbelievable. And we kind of got into a back and forth of obscure and defunct racing series, single mark series and mixed. I mean, no one's talking about that, Randy. I mean, Twitter, Clubhouse, no one's talking about obscure defunct racing series.
Absolutely not. Well, you got to say more about that, right? I mean, it's common for us to fire text back and forth like, have you seen this submission? It's crazy. And on this one, I think you roped in some other staffers too, and we're trying to quiz them. Who's ever heard of this? But you're not giving me credit, dude, because I fired back and said, when was that? 2009, 2010? I featured some sketchy Craigslist ad for a Alliance Cup car. And I'm actually trying to figure out if it's the same one that this dude submitted. We had a little single photo Craigslist feature for an Alliance Cup car. And there's a picture of it in the corkscrew at Laguna in the day. And I'm wondering if that has now come back around, 11 years later, and whoever's been, using it, to occupy the corner of their workshop is selling it now, or are we going to get two different Alliance Cup cars on the same platform?
That is true. Yeah, I said, and you were like, "Yeah, dude, Alliance Cup car. I featured one 10 years ago." Here's the one. That definitely piqued my curiosity. So yeah, Renault Alliance Racing Series. What is that all about? So what was the Renault Alliance? I believe it replaced the Le Car, the outgoing Le Car, which I think was the only car ever made with plastic gears. Alliance was the sedan. The Renault Encore was the hatchback. So they had the Alliance Cup, which was sedan only, single mark sedan only, which was West Coast, which is that wonderful ad coming through turn 9 at Laguna. You're probably talking about the same one.
Wait, but they didn't race it coast to coast? This was a West Coast phenomenon?
As far as I can, my research indicates Alliance was West Coast, and then they raced the Encore hatches on the East Coast.
Oh, man.
That was the Renault Focum Cup, not to be confused with the Renault Alliance Cup, which I think was just called the Renault Cup. These cars were 100% built in Wisconsin, so any ties to French heritage were pretty limited. I think Renault, they were, probably strapped for cash. They were trying to market the R5 Turbo that was coming out, so they wanted to do a cool race series. Actually, the most notable driver, and this is relevant to BAT, the most notable driver to come out of the Alliance series was Parker Johnstone, who went on to drive Indy cars, and who also happens to be a very active BAT commenter and bidder.
Fantastic. Yeah. In the last few years, I remember seeing Parker Johnstone, I think out of Seattle now, or I forget where he's out of now, but he did some bidding. He might have done some selling. I always love it when there's people from the ages of Indy 500 open wheel lore in the bidding action and especially commenting action, doing that sort of stuff. So I wonder if he got his start or if he was just kind of fooling around, scoring some SCCA points, trying to do that. Or what do? You win a free tire rack gift certificate if you win the season of the Alliance Cup or what? I don't know what the purse was for that crew.
He was earning his stripes. A lot of racers, if you don't have a rich family, you can't get into Formula 2000. You hop into the Alliance Cup, win some races, turn some heads, and maybe maybe Roger Penske gives you a call one day.
That's right. And so I pretty quickly pivoted that conversation on that text to Peugeot 505s. Also in SCCA competition. And so that, I think, sent some people scrambling for some YouTube footage or figuring out who those people were. And then you circled back that was some connection with this, right?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, you then took an even deeper cut on SCCA racing series from the 80s. You were like, 505 Turbo SCCA cars were amazing. That was an amazing series. And so meanwhile, I'm texting with Randy and the crew and emailing with Renault Alliance Cup owner. And I'm saying, this is such a wonderful, forgotten piece of history. And he's right back to me as I'm texting these guys saying, here's a picture of my 505 Turbo SCCA championship winning car. And I'm like, guys, this guy owns the 505 Turbo.
I was laughing when that came through. Of course, the same guy who owns one of those owns the other. And hopefully he knows how to turn the wrenches or has a mechanic who, has some sympathy for those cars. Who knows how you get one of those to run. But, I think both of them were pretty much showroom stock classes. So it's not like they were doing, wild race engines in these crazy boxy sedans. These were like the 505s, at least I remember being pretty stock in their configuration, stock alloy wheels, I think stripped interior, but pretty stock exterior with all the real lights in it and everything. And they're out going around, Road America or whatever, and made for some interesting stuff. But I think some of the guys found some YouTube vids of some of that era. Who knows if Parker Johnstone was driving or who else was in there. But anyway, that conversation went there, and then even deeper a little bit on some of those series.
Yeah, even more wonderful in the show in 1980s showroom stock discussion, and which you tipped me off to, was, I guess, fell under the banner of the SCCA Race Truck Challenge. You have a special place in your heart for the Stroh's Light sponsored Jeep Comanche. So I had to go in on this. SCCA did this series for basically showroom stock trucks of the period. So we're talking Jeep Comanches We're talking Nissan hard bodies, all the stuff we list all the time that people love.
Ford Ranger, early boxy Ford Ranger, General Tire livery Ford Ranger. Then I think actually of all of these, the French sedans and the truck racing, the easiest to pull up and see videos and some still photos of was the trucks, because they're so sport truck SCCA racing. It's just ridiculous and fantastic. Obviously, when I think truck or pickup truck racing, usually think junior ranks of NASCAR and different sorts of, tracker boat sponsored stuff and just crazy things that exist. And you kind of scratch your head a little bit, but it's fun to watch. But on a road course, looking at people trying to set up pickup trucks for road course with no tube frame. I think these are still unibody or body on frame. Must have been body on frame if they were light duty 2-wheel drive trucks of the 80s. And they're tuning these, live axle, potentially leaf sprung pickup trucks to go run around corners on road courses. It's just pretty absurd, but cool that it happened. And the reason my mind jumped there when we were talking about the Renaults is, the Archer brothers were kind of a famous race team, and I think they dabbled in both of them. I think they did the Stroh's Jeep trucks, which we also featured back in the day on BAT. A couple of those. You can go pretty deep on the archives and find some of those, all this weird stuff that was on, Kalamazoo, Michigan Craigslist that I somehow found in '08 or whatever. But those trucks and that race series, you can find some pictures and some videos that will make you shake your head.
No tube frame, dude. These were, I guess they probably took out the seatbelt presenter and maybe put in some racing belts and some, Kirky seat. But no. Also, fun fact, great Archer Bros drop. A lot of people forget that Steve Saleen drove a Ford Ranger in that series and tore it up.
Wow. Podiums for Steve Saleen.
Yeah, we got to get some of these guys together. Parker Johnstone, Steve Saleen. We got to rehash it all out. All the glory years, back driving Alliances and Dodge D50s and Ford Rangers.
Man, I back in that day when I was a little kid, I liked those Ford Rangers, like the 4-wheel drive version. So I would look at what the engine specs and stuff on those. I don't think they were racing like the V6 version. I think they were running like 2.2 liter 4s, trying to push those things around the racetrack. I don't know. I think they gave them sticky tires, and those Rangers look like they have like a funky Celine-esque body kit on them. And then you get the yellow, white livery and you go tear it up. So anyway, I'm into it. I'd love to know where some of those have ended up, or if we could have some of the actual race cars and trucks come through BAT. I think those would maybe raise eyebrows enough after 200,000 cars to get a spot on the site. What do you think?
No, Randy's totally right. Yeah, definitely check out Race Truck Challenge on YouTube. All the vids are like super low res, but it doesn't matter. They're wonderful. And isn't it funny that Europe had like the super awesome 944 Turbo Rothmans Cup with all like the big names, and in the US we're cheering on, Nissan hard bodies rubbing Ford Rangers. It's wonderful.
Yeah, totally. Anyway, great finds. That's a good submission to stir up some interesting text discussion, and I'm sure once that thing hits live on the site, some people, maybe we can post some videos to the listing or get people fired up about it again. But yeah, when you submit weirdo stuff to BAT, we're always happy to give a little publicity nudge in the podcast, talking about some stuff that's coming onto the site soon. So hopefully that'll be one of them. Next topic is one that's asked about all the time. We love answering sort of user questions, and this one didn't come explicitly as a podcast question, but it's just one that it's sometimes, people don't even know Howard or the curation team at BAT, and they fire first with this like feeling deep in their bones about when I'm going to sell my car, because I'm going to time the calendar of when this is going to make sense. I've got a Camaro convertible, Vet convertible, and I'm not selling it until April 1st, because the leaves are going to turn, they're going to the snow is going to melt, and I am going to see so many more bids on my on my car, my convertible or my motorcycle or whatever. And I think it's really interesting to see that we see so much data really contrary to that, like the opposite. And we see so much action in the wintertime. And I think it's just interesting to talk about what the realities are there and what we see in terms of perception from sellers and from bidders alike. And just talk about that a little bit. Howard, what do you think?
Yeah, we totally have after 6+ years doing auctions. Kind of a running joke in the office around selling season and when that is, and obviously selling season is 12 months out of the year. But yeah, I mean it's this whole perception and dynamic around, as Randy said, timing your sale for the best result. Whether that's the best time during the day, the best day of the week, the best season of the year. My personal opinion is I chalk it mostly up to superstition, and that's fine. People, it's funny, like sellers who sell a lot of cars on BAT, there are some that only want their auctions to end on Mondays, and there are some that say I never want Mondays, I only want Thursdays or Fridays. And my mind goes to like the ultimate example of like traditional when should it end, like eBay Sunday night and my auction Sunday evening. And we still get requests for that. Guys that have been around for years and sold cars like, hey, Howard, I want to make sure this ends on Sunday night, right? And it's like, dude, we've never done that. Although weekend auctions are something we talk about. I wouldn't mind experimenting with weekend auctions.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I just think it's super interesting. I think a lot of that is legacy, pre-internet, and maybe non sort of auction dynamic, right? There's the type of stuff we list creates such a dynamic of energy and scarcity and bid now, or you're not going to see another one of these for 3 years while you're looking for them. So honestly, if I'm looking for something that's not going to come around for a long time and it's in January versus March, am I going to think about that substantially different? I'm probably not. So, but I think back in maybe the olden days, right? You're putting a for sale sign in the windshield down at the end of your driveway on some like rural road where people are coming by and there's snow on your convertible. I get it, right? I mean, that's not really going to work. But I think the internet has, the reach that the vehicles have on any internet platform, but certainly on BAT. I mean, we just, closed out the year and saw just a massive uptick November, December, right? December was, cars were selling and volume was the highest it's ever been, frankly. And there have to be buyers to drive that. And I've always thought that the seasonality discussion was more on the seller side also than on the buyer side. It's not like, oh, the buyers are, holed up in their house in the winter, and so they don't have any money to spend, or they don't have any attention to give to this sort of stuff. It always seems like there's plenty of buyers around whenever there's a good listing on BAT. That could be any day of the year, any moment. But it's the seller that gets the superstition, right? It's the seller that gets the concern. I don't want to sell my motorcycle in December. And I get it, right? I mean, do you want your car to be the last car ending on New Year's Eve, or do you want your car to be the, first car out of the chute, after some, major event of some, sporting event, political event, or, something happening, natural disaster, right? I mean, there's some things you kind of maybe want to take into consideration, but I think we've seen, I remember on Christmas Eve once. It was actually a car of mine, my Mustang, Howard. I think you remember that fastback that I sold, and then it sold a couple times on BAT since. A car that I obviously track and follow to this day, but it sold once on, I don't know why, but we had it end on Christmas Eve, and it had this gangbuster finish, right? And it's like people say all the time, oh, well, make sure, you give plenty of buffer around, any holiday or anything like that. And that thing just killed it. It had this bidding war, and it's Christmas Eve. I don't know where these people were, whether they were on their phones and doing family stuff, or whether they were, didn't care about the schedule of the holiday, or whether they were traveling or whatever, but they went nuts after that Mustang. And I remember sitting there just shaking my head going like, it doesn't matter what day you sell, as long as you have a good presentation and a good vehicle, first of all, and are engaged in the comments as usual, that sort of stuff. It goes super well. So anyway, that was one of my anecdotes on it.
Totally. Yeah, another one is like Monday holidays. Best kept secret, best day to end your car on BAT, Monday holiday. We've ended auctions every single Monday holiday, I think, for the most part, since the start. And man, I remember like 2016, 17, 18, I'm texting Randy on whatever, Labor Day, Memorial Day, whatever it is, like another Monday holiday, like best day ever. Like we killed it, sold every car, and so I always think that's a funny thing. But yeah, I agree with Randy. The whole timing, it's kind of a bygone era topic, right? Like people's time today is more flexible than it's ever been. Like what someone can be doing at any given point in the day can be anything, and is often bidding on cars. The whole like eBay Sunday night, yeah, like in 1998, like you were home then, and so it made sense to end an auction. But yeah, that's not the case anymore. So yeah, I mean, the truth is, well presented cars that are, with great sellers, and if the car is neat, it's going to sell well, really, no matter when it is listed. That is really the honest truth. But it's funny to see people's opinions and feelings around when they're selling stuff.
Yeah. And we think of it in an interesting way, right? We do 7-day auctions. So we're always thinking, a week ahead. We're like, oh, can we start a car today? Because it's going to end on this, day or this moment. And so our team is always having to think about that and field those questions about, which day do we launch it? Because exactly 7 days or almost 7 days after the launch date is when that thing will be ending. So we always need to make sure that we're kind of cognizant of the calendar and what's happening. And our team does a great job of that. And I think, we've seen some amazing results. Yeah. I mean, President's Day was a couple days ago, right? And there were 6-figure cars selling on BAT just a couple days ago. And so, we look at that sometimes as a benefit because you can kind of get into game theory sort of psychology, right? Are people sitting around not working that day so they have even more time to spend on their devices or watching auctions, or are they busy that day on their fishing trip or whatever, right? I mean, you can kind of steer this thing in multiple directions if you're trying to figure it out. But the data shows and the sales shows, which obviously are all on BAT, you can go back and look at any date in time in our past 6 years of doing auctions and see what happened on Christmas Eve or on New Year's Eve or on any different sort of holiday. We have taken a few different holidays where we've stopped having auctions close. But it's certainly, the lesson has been keep them moving, keep them ending on those days as well, because buyers, frankly, show up and they have time and focus on those days, and they end up, bidding and charging really hard. And, maybe another layer of that, I mean, people have always asked, oh, you do all your auctions in the middle of the day on Monday through Friday. People are at work, or can people not bid or whatever? And maybe the first, couple months or maybe even a couple years, we kind of maybe second guess that a little bit, and we're talking about it and even discussing it. But I think if you look at the results on BAT, it's pretty hard to argue that it's been prohibitive to bidding. I think that people, find a way. If there's that car that's not going to show up and this is the one that you want, it's on your watch list and you're getting your text alert and your phone alert that it's ending in an hour, you figure a way to get out of your work meeting and make it happen.
Yeah, I think maybe we're a little spoiled being headquartered in San Francisco, where it doesn't snow, right? We're communicating with someone in Michigan who's like, I'm snowed in, can't get the car to the garage. Like, this is a horrible time to sell. We're like, well, I don't know, we're 70 degrees where I'm sitting. We're going out for lunch in a few minutes. People are driving around here. They might not be in some parts of the country, but even like the historically big sales, like the whole Arizona auction week, that's in the dead of winter and third week of January, right? Barrett-Jackson made its name selling cars in the dead of winter, right? Europe, like Retromobile could not be at a more inhospitable time the first weekend of February in Paris. Like, the weather is dreadful, and that's the date, and it's probably the biggest car sales event in all of Western Europe. So, to each his own.
Yeah, and I mean those auction companies are no dummies, right? I mean they've seen many cycles and many years. They've been around for decades, and the fact that they're doing things in the middle of winter, honestly, I think it gives people something to look forward to. It gives people some liveliness to their winter. Yeah, if they're stuck in some winter weather or just sort of a more dreary sort of cycle, or honestly events. Sometimes you go and this, Howard, right? I mean, sometimes it's kind of dry on events for a 3, 4, 5 month period. There can be not a lot of action. And in California and some warmer states, sometimes there are winter events to counter that. But in so much of the U.S. and certainly Canada and elsewhere where our audience resides, it can be sort of a quiet season, right? So honestly, picking up a car or picking up a project, I mean, the kind of stuff I'm looking for in January and February and March is stuff to kind of get ready for the good season that I know is coming. So that makes me kind of all the more keen and tuned in as a bidder. So if you're a seller and people are sitting around like can't wait to click on your listing, that's sort of opportunity. So yeah, anyway, an interesting topic for sure. And one, like Howard says, that we just volley around in the BAT office all the time because we get people all the time that are not excited about selling in Jan, Feb, March, but we just encourage you to go check out the watch and view counts on listings and watch the bid action that we're seeing. And I mean, the results kind of speak for themselves in the winter months.
Flip side of that is there is the corner case market of winter vehicles, which sellers only want to sell in the winter months. For example, Chrysler Snow Runners, which we have maybe listed almost as many as they produced. I don't know how many they made, but
I would argue we've probably listed more than any other venue. Can we claim that? Has somebody sold a lot of 25 of those somewhere else, and so we can't claim to be the champion there? But what have we sold 10 or 11 of those now?
I don't know, but I don't know that people were restoring Snow Runners before they started being, having their own model page on BAT, but that's a thing now. And that's wonderful.
That's definitely a thing. I was trying to describe to my 10-year-old son what a Chrysler Snow Runner is, and I have a 56 Chrysler, and so I think his mind went there, and I was like, no, okay, it's this little motorbike with skis on the bottom, and he's like, I don't know, he doesn't think that'll qualify for the latest Red Bull extreme competitions these days, but who knows, maybe it would. But yeah, anyway, what other winter stuff? I mean, we have a new ATC ATV category. You could purchase some of that stuff, vintage Honda pilots. Before they used that name for SUVs, they used it for all-terrain vehicles, which is pretty awesome. We've sold a good number of those. That one's on the site right now, I think, or just finished, Howard, in front of the wood pile. I don't know if you saw that one. Had a super cool set of photography with it. What else is a winter rig? I don't think the boats we sell qualify as a winter vehicle. Maybe some of the four-wheel drives or SUVs.
Oh man, you had me at in front of the wood pile. I don't know what that was. Check that out right now.
I'm dead serious, dude. Go look at the ATC or ATV category. You'll see that thing. I think it sold for a whole bunch of money, more than a CRX or whatever. So
we got some tractors. I don't know if I didn't grow up in tractor country, if that's a thing, but I don't know if that's a winter vehicle, but certainly a all-terrain vehicle. And if you want, something affordable with a Lamborghini badge on it or a Porsche badge, you can go the tractor route. Yeah.
And funny there, exactly what you mentioned. The dynamic is the funny part, right? Because those people, you're like, okay, it's August. Let's go. Let's sell one of those. And those people are like, no, I'm not selling my Snow Runner. I want a slot, the second week of December. So whoever buys it can use it all season or something like that. Anyway, kind of the opposite. But we see it all. We see all those requests. And yeah, anyway, if you have any questions about seasonality or questions or thoughts around that, we'd love to hear from you. You can always reach out to us, podcast@bringatrailer.com. Shoot us a note or shoot us some other questions you'd like to hear about in terms of the dynamics of buying and selling on BAT. That was great talking about that, Howard. I really loved it. So now we move into the next part of our show today, and we're excited for Howard's interview.
All right. We have a really awesome guest speaker this week. I'm super excited to welcome Jason Van Sickle. Jason is the curator of vehicles for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. Jason, glad you're here. How are things in Indy?
Thanks for having me. It's good. It's a little cold, and we just got a big snow, so it's probably not as good as you over there in California, right?
There you go. Yep, yep, yeah. And for those of you who may not be as familiar with the museum, it really is such a special place with a lot of really spectacular cars that we'll get to hear a bit more about today from Jason. It's actually located right inside the Speedway Oval, right in the infield of the racetrack. So when you report to work every day, do you drive in under turn three, whatever it is, and you're working from Indianapolis Motor Speedway every day of the week?
Yeah. So obviously, it's right inside the south end of the oval between turn one and two, and the iconic tunnel that you hear a lot of people talk about entering underneath the racetrack. And when you come up the tunnel, you see the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum right in front of you, and it's still one of the opportunities to really just have goosebumps and kind of pinch yourself, saying, this is an opportunity that I have.
Well, I agree with you, and you guys were kind enough to welcome me there when I was there in December 2019, so a few months before COVID. And yeah, you can really feel the history there. It's totally an institution, and you step on the grounds, and there's something special going on there.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to point out is the 2.5 mile oval built in 1909. The dimensions, if you will, of the track really haven't changed. Obviously, the surface, from going to most notably the 3.2 million bricks throughout the years to asphalt. But really, when it comes to major sporting events, you only have a few iconic locations like the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Augusta, Wimbledon, that the athletes throughout the decades play on the same course. And that's something that's really, really amazing to think about too.
Totally. So, yeah, I think it'd be awesome if you'd be able to give us just a little bit of history of the museum, the relationship to the Speedway, and anything else you might think would be interesting to know.
Yeah, the museum is an interesting dynamic with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We're actually separate. We're separate 501c3 non-for-profit, separate from IMS, IMS's new owners, Roger Penske and Penske Entertainment. The foundation, which operates the IMS Museum, opened in 1956, and it was a very small collection at that time. It was developed by Tony Holman, who the Holman family owned the track from 1945 to early of 2020 before selling it to Penske Entertainment. It started with 12 cars on the wing of the newly built administration building. That was on the corner of 16th Street in Georgetown, just outside of Turn 1. In 1976, our current building was built, and our collection has grown. Obviously, automobiles are what we are known for. We have over 200 automobiles, race cars, pace cars, passenger cars, potpourri of different automobiles in that regard. That we'll talk about a little bit later. But then memorabilia, trophies, historical artifacts, you name it, we have it in the collection.
No, that's really interesting. And so is Indy considered a super speedway like you would consider Daytona or Talladega or some of those?
Yeah. With the speeds that they reach, even the NASCARs, obviously they're bigger, heavier cars than the Indy cars. But Indy cars, they go around there now at pole speeds, low 230s. Back in the late 90s, Arie Luyendyk has the 4-lap average record that he broke in 1996. When you think about that, how long ago that was, at 236.4 miles per hour for a 4-lap average. So he was entering turn 3 at over 250 miles an hour. And even the NASCARs, they book it around there. They're doing high 40-second laps around the speedway when you're thinking they're pushing 3,500 pounds, and obviously more of a brick through the air than an Indy car, if you will. But it is a super speedway, though banking, it's very low banking in today's standards. It's only 9 degrees, 12 minutes compared to somewhere like Daytona that's over 30-degree banking.
That was going to be my next point. When you consider the speeds you just rattled off, I mean, considering that you're not up on the Daytona banking, which makes carrying a high rate of speed maybe less treacherous. At Indy, you're turning left 4 times, but you're not up in the air.
Yeah, one of the biggest things for the 500 is the drivers. The track looks so unassuming. Quite honestly, it's four identical, physical wise, identical turns, 2 long 5/8 of a mile straightaways, and then 2 short shoots between those turns. But you talk to the drivers, and each corner has its own nuances. Whether it's a bump in a certain area that they'll talk about, the different time, because the track is so low banked, different times during the day, especially during the progression of whether it's a fuel run, a tire run, or even just how the sun is going over the track later in the race, the track changes and the shading and things like that. So for such an unassuming track, if you look at it, if someone was to draw it on the map, it strikes fear in every driver that really gets behind a wheel of a race car around the place.
Just the sheer enormity of the facility itself is pretty wild. So for folks who haven't been there, definitely highly recommend. Jason, would love to hear a little bit about your background. When I hear curator of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum, my mind goes to a seasoned, distinguished older gentleman, maybe ex-chief judge of the Amelia Island Concours, but you are not that. You are 29 years old. You're a very impressive and knowledgeable young man when it comes to this stuff. So how did you get the curator job? Tell us about your career path.
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing. I bit of a blur, to be quite honest. My going back to when I was very young, my father and grandfather were both automotive hobbyists, and mostly in hot rodding and muscle cars. So, going to car shows, going to just being around vintage automobiles, mainly American, it was always something that I kind of gravitated to through that family aspect. When I was going through school and eventually university, I really wanted to do something with the automobiles, especially with the history, but knowing that it's such a niche area. Being from Indianapolis, obviously the 500 and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is such a cultural icon and aspect of the state itself that, that interests me too. So when I was in university, I actually started right after the 2011 race. Undergrad, I was a docent in the museum and a tour guide. So I was giving tours to hundreds of people, thousands of people over the year, really, of the speedway on the bus and things like that. And fortunately, in 2015, after I graduated, I was offered a full-time position. And then since then, I've really just worked my way, I guess, through the ranks, if you will, and where I am right now.
No, that's awesome. Is that one of those deals to be the curator? You start by sweeping the floors, and if you hang around long enough, maybe you get called up for the dream job.
I guess in my situation, it was. It's I look back and I always think 2015 or 2011 version of me would never think I had the opportunity to hang around some of the vehicles that we have in the collection or some of the experiences that I have. So it's truly, I cherish that, and obviously use that as a background to push the museum into the future.
It must be funny if you're interviewing new docents. I imagine they're probably 2 or 3 times your age, but you probably know 2 or 3 times more than them about Indy history. So those must be funny interactions when those men and women come into your office.
Yeah, when I walked in there, I was 20 years old with long hair, and the first thing they said was, "You're going to bring our age down by decades," because I was the youngest person there by probably 30 years at the most. So, it's interesting to look back.
That is great. So, tell us a little bit about kind of the core collection currently at the museum. And what you're doing with deaccessioning some vehicles on Bring a Trailer.
Yeah, so obviously the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum, one of our mission is to celebrate the thrill and excitement of the 100 and now 11 years of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Um, the the collection is pretty broad. Tony Holman, that I mentioned before, and Carl Kaiser, our first curator, all the way back in the 1950s. They actually had two museums under the foundation. They had the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum that I mentioned earlier, that started off as that 12 car display in the wing of the administration building. But Tony Holman was originally from Terre Haute, Indiana, which is about 2 hours southwest of right on the Illinois border. And he had another museum under the foundation called the Early Wills Museum. So while he was collecting Indianapolis 500 race cars, winners, and various different race cars, he was also collecting passenger cars. So we have a broad depth of passenger cars included in our race car collection. We have over 35 winning Indy 500 winning cars, dating back all the way to the first 1911 Marmon Wasp that was built in Indianapolis. The most recent Indy 500 winner that we own is Jacques Villeneuve's 1995 Reynard. But then we also have some cars that are on loan. Most recent is the Alexander Rossi 2016 100th running winning car. So we have a few cars that are on loan. And we do temporary exhibits. We usually do 2 major exhibits a year, which will bring in utilized cars from the collection, but then also bring in loaned cars from across the country. We also have a large passenger car collection that I mentioned, a large Indiana-built car collection. We have over 30 Indiana-built marquees. That is obviously going back to the past of the Indianapolis 500 and the history. The Indiana-built automobiles played a huge part in that, in the construction, the need for a speedway from Carl Fisher, the main driver of the building of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So Indiana-built cars are close to our mission too, and we've done some different exhibits to celebrate that. But the deaccessioning process, over the last 3 years, we've did some internal review, soul searching, if you will, utilizing our mission and our statement of scope to highlight cars that tend not to support our mission in our scope. So that is where we started the process of reviewing, and then that actually is where we were introduced to each other with BAT, and we thought it was a great opportunity and a great platform to utilize these deaccession items. So since last June, we've been offering cars on BAT to the public, and it's a great opportunity because, one, it offers cars that we've had for, in some cases, decades that may not support our mission to the fullest, but those stories of that vehicle continue to a new, owner, new generation. So it's a great opportunity.
Absolutely. No, it's been an honor to work with you guys. I think to date, the museum has listed around 40 vehicles on BAT, and I know we've got many more to go that will keep us busy throughout 2021. And I know our community members are super stoked to be able to, have really the once in a lifetime chance to acquire really special cars from the institution. And every single vehicle you guys have listed has been terrific, and there's been a lot of excitement behind all of them.
Yeah, we love the awareness. The commenters are we've learned so much from our cars. A lot of these cars were purchased in the 50s and 60s, and records are sparse, and they didn't quite honestly really care about provenance like we do today, and various other things. So the commenters have been very helpful on kind of highlighting any sort of potential discrepancies we may have, or lore that have come with the car, things like that. So it's been a learning experience on both ends.
Now, that the inaugural 1911 winner, the Marmon Wasp, was that Ray Haroon that drove that?
Yeah, that was Ray Haroon. So he was a fascinating character. At that time, a lot of the drivers in these early automotive races were actually engineers, and they were dual purpose. They got a paycheck from the company as an engineer. So people like Louis Chevrolet, Bob Berman, the Duesenberg brothers to an extent, they were in some cases self-taught. Some were what we would call higher educated schooling wise, but a lot of them were self-taught, learn on the fly geniuses, quite frankly, and they weren't afraid to hop in a race car and test what they designed. So Ray Haroon actually for the 500, he retired a year before. Howard Marmon from the Marmon company that produced the Indiana built company that produced the Marmon Wasp and passenger cars, convinced Ray to come out of retirement. He entered the race. He started 28th, which still today is the farthest back a winner has started for the 500 to win the race, and won the race on strategy, outright, pacing to save tires, whereas he could go faster, but he averaged 75 miles an hour to save tires, which then would at that time tremendously save time during the pits, because pit stops would be tens of minutes, let alone tens of seconds like they are today.
Totally. So yeah, no, I can talk the talk a little bit about Indy history. Don't ask me who won the race in 1912, but I know about Ray Haroon. But in those days, up until the 20s, most, if not all, racers had riding mechanics, and part of that job was spotting traffic and other cars on the track, right?
Yeah, no, the two-seater cars, at least for Indianapolis, that lasted until 1922. Technically, Ray skirted the rules. It was an unwritten rule, put it that way. There was nothing that said you had to have a riding mechanic, but it was kind of de facto. So they came up with this streamlined single-seater Marmon Wasp that was wild. And actually, the other 39 competitors kind of cried foul and said it was dangerous because the reasons that you mentioned. The riding mechanic would act as a spotter, would tell the driver what was going on. They also didn't have electric or mechanical fuel and oil pumps, so they would hand pump pressure into the fuel and oil tank throughout the race to keep the pressure up. So to bypass the controversy, Ray fastened a rearview mirror on the cowling of the Marmon Wasp, in what we believe is the first use of a rearview mirror in a race car and an automobile to the level that it was. So, that car's historic in very ways, but even mundane ways that we think today of the rearview mirror.
Interesting. Yeah, no, Jason, I'm sure you could give a symposium on Indy racing history circa 1911 to 1925. We'll have to have you back to get into that.
Yeah, those are the golden years. That's the interesting bunch.
Certainly. So I think at one point, at the peak, the museum had something like 300 vehicles under its belt. So tell us a little bit about kind of maintenance and how you keep up that quantity of cars. Do you guys have in-house mechanics? How does that whole system work?
Yeah, so we do. Historically, we've had a in-house restoration, if you will. It actually dates back to a race team that was owned by Mary Holman George, who was the daughter of Tony Holman. And in the 50s, she owned a race team, and it was called Howe Racing, HOW. And it was located on the grounds of the Speedway outside the track, outside Turn 2. When the racing season was over, and they had, midgets, sprints, champ cars. But in the wintertime, they would also restore and repair cars for the foundation. So eventually Howe Racing was kind of just absorbed by the foundation and became our full-time restoration department. And we actually had one of our longtime restoration members, AJ Fairbairn, retire. He's had a long career. He's a Kiwi that's traveled the world with F2, F3 teams, and then in the 90s settled, put his stakes into the United States and started working for us. But he had another gentleman that dates back all the way to the 60s that unfortunately passed away in the 2014, named Bill Spurley, who was a German. And then there was another restoration tech named Hans Spurbach. So at one point, our restoration team was 2 Germans and a Kiwi, which you would never think about in Indianapolis. But the knowledge that they had was second to none. We're looking at a 3-person restoration department now, where it's actually a transition, which is pretty exciting. We're trying to elevate the restoration department from a garage, if you will, that just they they keep the cars running, if you will, to a restoration department that is on par with the lore of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the museum. So it's a bit of an exciting time. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of new faces joining the crew, but it's exciting.
You guys were kind enough not only to give me a full tour of the museum and the current exhibits, but also to bring me down to the basement, which I know is not open to the public. And you personally showed me around there, and really neat, all the cars down there that a lot of folks probably wouldn't believe you guys have. But on that note, yeah, tell us about kind of what are the current exhibits, if someone walked in the museum today, and what are the future plans on that end?
Yeah, obviously COVID in 2020, like everyone else, it's affected us. We had to juggle some of our exhibit plans, and quite frankly, we lucked out in a way. In November of 2019, we opened an exhibit called From the Vault, and it's pretty much our cars. It's exciting because we're highlighting our cars, the potpourri, if you will, the diverse nature of our collection. Because for the longest time, the basement was off limits, and you had to be a pretty special person to get down there, if you will. But we pretty much brought the basement up to the top. So we highlighted a wide variety of cars. So right now, and it's been adjusted because we had to extend it due to COVID, and I don't want to bore you with that, but it will remain open until the end of April 2021. So From the Vault, we have our 1954 Mercedes W196 streamlined body car, the Formula One Streamliners, beautiful car. We have the 1964 250 LM that won the 1965 24 Hours Le Mans, the last time Ferrari won outright at Le Mans. We also have our GT40 Holman and Moody built car that participated in 1966 that was driven by Mark Donohue and Paul Hawkins. And Walt Hanskin was in the 24 Hours of Daytona. And then some Indy cars. We have a Mercedes Type S passenger car that's part of it. Just a very diverse, some Champ dirt cars. Janet Guthrie's 1978 Wildcat. Just a wild amount of cars in that exhibit.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, separate from the Indy 500 winners and the super significant cars that whose history tie directly to the Speedway. You just mentioned the two. I mean, maybe the two most significant cars the museum has are that W196, which I think was a Sterling Moss and Fangio car.
Yeah.
That was kind of in the crossover era when Formula One races could have open wheel cars and also cars with more closed bodywork. And the 250 LM, which, as you pointed out, was the 65 Le Mans winner. Unbelievable car to see in the flesh. That was Maston and Gregory and Jochen Rindt. Shout out to Jochen Rindt, one of my favorite drivers. Drove Alpha GTAs in the 60s in small displacement sports car racing in Europe. And I think also the only Formula One driver to posthumously win the championship in 1970. I think he died in a practice crash at Monza, I believe, but was far enough ahead in the points that year that he was the champion. So those two cars, the museum has owned those two for 50 plus years, and those are really spectacular.
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing to have those as part of the collection. Obviously, you wouldn't think of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum owning those two Formula One or road racing cars, legendary cars. But the 196 was donated by Mercedes-Benz in 1965, so 10 years after the fact. Fangio drove it in a Formula Libre race in 1954 with the 3-liter, and then it did participate with the streamlined body. So it actually had both the monopost and the streamlined body in the two races that particular car ran. Moss drove it at Monza and then through a rod. So it unfortunately didn't have the success as it did in that Formula Libre race. But the Ferrari was purchased in 1970, so only 5 years after its triumph as part of the NART team in 1965. But it also ran, it kind of bounce back and forth running either to the 24 Hours Daytona or going back to Le Mans. And it actually ran that year, 1970s, 24 Hours of Le Mans 24 Hours of Daytona before being purchased by the foundation.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot of those Ferraris soldiered on after they were brand new. I mean, I think my favorite stat is a lot of people forget that I think John Morton finished second at Daytona or Sebring in what the time was a clapped out Ferrari Daytona in 1979. So much like the 250 LM, that they kept racing them.
Yeah, they were competitive too, and that's the good part about it. I mean, when you think about it, it's hard to remember because now the longevity of race cars is, Indy cars. Some cases the tubs are from 2012. They've just been altered depending on whatever the bodywork requirement was. But a year-old race car was the oldest thing in the world, and no one wanted it because they wanted all the new and improved stuff. But having these cars that have run, like we have, the 1939-1940 winner is a Maserati 8CTF. Wilbur Shaw won both those years, but that car ran another 13 plus years competitively in the 500. And that car is part of our winning 500 cars. So it's not just American cars or any 500 cars. There are some international flair part of our museum.
Now, speaking of winners, I've noticed in some of your BAT auction listings, you will often have, you have videos in pretty much all of them, but sometimes you will have current IndyCar drivers that do a little walk around and test drive demonstration. So what's that like working at the Speedway? Do you guys have drivers stopping by all the time? Is Will Power and Simon Pagenaud dropping their head in your office every once in a while, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, they that's one of the perks of the job to get these drivers. Obviously, we try to work with their schedules. Will and Will would be great actually right now with what he's doing on social media. He's just tearing it up there. So having him on a BAT drive around, I don't know if the car will hold up with the power that he put into it. But we had 3-time 500 winner Johnny Rutherford. He drove a Lincoln. I think it was a 27 Lincoln town car, and then the next one he got in was a 39 Bantam. So I mean, you had a car that was 20 plus feet long, and then you had a car that felt like 6 feet long. So it's great to have these guys. They love it. They get a kick out of it. Obviously, driving cars that they have to learn. Obviously, Model Ts have given them some trouble. Because just the nature of driving a Model T is difficult in today's world, but they have a blast.
No, it's pretty funny. I don't know how much instruction or coaching they get before they hop in these cars. But you had Hinecliffe. I probably butchered his name.
Hinchcliffe.
He's like going 230 miles an hour around the Speedway, and then he's doing a walk around on the 1914 Franklin and taking it on a little test drive. It's pretty hilarious.
Yeah. He loved. He did a 39 Rolls-Royce Wraith town car that we offered, and he loved that car. And then he also enjoyed. We had a 29 Model A, and he really had a rumble seat. That was a really neat car that we offered. Just old hot rod feel, even though it was pretty stock. He had a blast driving that around.
That's so cool. No, you and I could keep riffing for I feel a few more hours, but thank you for being with us. This was super interesting. Quick note on the museum. So you guys are run by a foundation. The museum is a 501c3, if I'm not mistaken. So tell us a little bit about kind of are you guys open for visitors now? How can people support the museum? And what are you guys doing this year?
Yeah, no, it's that's one of the biggest kind of misnomers that people have with the museum. The understanding that we are a separate entity, obviously being inside the oval, and it lends to that. But yeah, we're completely run by a separate 501c3 foundation that owns the collection, manages the collection, maintains the collection, and all that. COVID, like I mentioned, has been pretty tough. We had obviously a year ago the shutdown. We were shut down for about 4 months, and then once again we were shut down for 6 weeks at the end of the year to the public. But we are open. We've obviously reevaluated all our safety protocols and with social distancing and masks and things like that, and hopefully there's some light at the end of the tunnel for that. But we are open. We are in our winter hours right now, 10 to 4, open every day. Usually we're open every day except Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Day to the public. Like I mentioned, From the Vault is open until the end of April. We also have our Andy Granatelli exhibit that will be open the remainder of 2021. That's highlighting the iconic larger-than-life owner, most known for his STP commercials and his time with STP and promoting that. But obviously his hard luck at the Indianapolis 500, eventually winning with Mario Andretti in 1969. And then we look to close From the Vault in late April, and then we can't announce it yet, but we have a summer exhibit for 2021 that will honor a certain multi-winner Indianapolis 500 winner. That will open May 1st, and we're really excited to get that up and running. If you can't join us in person, obviously your support is much appreciated. You can find information on that at indyracingmuseum.org.
No, that's awesome. When I had come to see you a year and a half ago, I was coming from Ann Arbor, where I was at the Michigan-Ohio State football game. But definitely near the top of my sporting experience list is sitting in a box at the 500. So maybe if we keep having you on the podcast, I can inch a little closer to those box seats.
Yeah, no, you'll be a little crowded compared to Ann Arbor. I mean, what does that hold? 110,000.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, so we double that. So we're about 230,000 permanent seats, the largest sporting arena in the world. So you'll feel a little next time if you go to the 500 and then go to another Michigan game, you'll feel a little empty compared to the 500.
Awesome. Well, Jason, thank you again. Really, really fun chatting with you, and I look forward to stopping by the Speedway and the museum later this year.
Well, thank you. It's been great. Look forward to doing it again.
And Jason and the museum have some really neat cars coming up on BAT over the next few weeks and months, so keep your eye out for those. And Jason, pleasure to have you, and thanks again.
Thank you.